from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
It is our privilege today to introduce to all our viewers the new president of the University of Idaho, Dr. Robert Hoover. We're just very honored to have him with us today. He holds a distinguished background in higher education. Prior to coming to our state university, he holds both a baccalaureate and master's degrees from Arizona State University. He received his doctorate in political science from the University of California at Santa Barbara. As to his professional experience, he had many positions at Utah State University, including a full professorship and later dean of that institution. And he served as academic vice president of the University of Nevada for 5 years prior to coming to Moscow, Idaho to serve as the president of the University of Idaho. Dr. Hoover, it's our first visit with you, but we want to have you back in the future, and thank you for taking time to talk today with us about your philosophy and goals and visions of higher education, and particularly what will be happening at the University of Idaho. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure for me to be here.
And as always, I'm very pleased to have our two regular panelists. First of all is Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Steve Shink, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and I shall ask Janelle to commence today's questioning.
President Hoover, it's such a pleasure to have you here, and I know that many of our viewers are hoping to get to know you, and one of those things that they no doubt would like to know something about is your philosophy of education. What do you think of higher education, and what are you going to do as the president of the University of Idaho?
Well, my philosophy revolves around the experience I've had over the last 26 years in higher education. I was, in a sense, in an academic sense, raised in a land-grant institution, first one being Utah State, and then the second one being the University of Nevada. While there, I came to understand what that mission is about. We often forget that land-grant institutions are, in some ways, were perhaps the most profound institution for educational reform in the history of this country, probably rivaled only by the community college kind of experience. When they were established in the 1860s during the Civil War, Justin Morrill, who was a senator from Vermont, had three goals in mind. And the first one was to provide for access to higher education on the part of the working class of America. And that was really extraordinarily revolutionary in the 1860s because it was largely an all-white male group of students who went to very expensive private colleges on the east coast of this country. And what Senator Morrill wanted to do was to put one of these institutions in each state and open up higher education opportunities. Secondly, what he wanted to do was develop new knowledge, which was an idea that was beginning to come to fruition in Germany at this point in time in the establishment of research universities. And he wanted to develop new knowledge which could be used. And with that new knowledge was the third goal, and that was to use that knowledge to improve the quality of life for the working people of America. Well, in the 1860s, working people of America were in mining, but more importantly, they were mostly in agriculture in this country. And so these schools have taken on an ag character and an engineering, mining, natural resources orientation over the years. But just as importantly, Senator Morrill wanted a liberal education in the classical sense for the working class. So all these institutions also have very strong liberal arts programs and humanities to provide that liberal education. And that's where I come from. I'm interested in institutions which provide a challenge and an opportunity to the citizenry of a state and to make that as accessible as possible. And secondly, to develop new knowledge as a research university. And thirdly, to get that knowledge into the hands of people. In my own case, my grandmother found herself a widow shortly after World War I. And she had 4 kids, 8 through 12, 3 girls and a boy. And she lived on a farm in Iowa. and she had to take over the running of that farm after her husband died, my grandfather. And my mother was the youngest of those children. As my mother says, my grandmother knew how to do these things because she got in the car and drove someplace and got out and asked directions when she needed to ask directions. My mother suggested I never would have been able to achieve that because I never would ask directions. And she got out and asked directions at Iowa State University, which was about 40 miles east of her farm. And what she did was to enlist the help of Iowa State through its cooperative extension program, and she became a very successful farmer. In addition, she enlisted the help of the home economics department, which helped her run a family and a kitchen and all the other things without a husband. The story would really be complete if all 4 kids had gone on and graduated from Iowa State. They didn't. It was the Depression, and they just, even though she was quite successful when she remarried, she had nearly tripled the size of the farm that she had. It was still a difficult era, and so I was to become the first one to graduate from college. And while that story didn't come to me early, it came only after I'd worked at land-grant institutions. It I think, expresses quite well what institutions of that type are all about. And of course, that's what the University of Idaho is a land-grant institution.
Thank you.
Steve Sheen.
Dr. Hoover, I mean, you've done a great job already of explaining to us something about land-grant institutions, but could you take it a step further and maybe apply some of those things to the differences between a state land-grant university and other state higher education facilities?
There are several types of institutions, what we would call regional institutions, which usually provide assistance to the local community. There are state universities, which are normally thought of as, say, the liberal arts and humanities kind of capital of the state. In the case of Indiana, Indiana University is a strong state university. And the land grant there is Purdue, which is very strong in engineering and in agriculture, natural resources management. In some cases, however, you find these institutions in the same one. The University of Wisconsin, University of Arizona, my alma mater, the University of California, they're all combine these things in one institution. And then you have, increasingly, particularly in the West, you have now the development of large regional universities, which are usually in urban areas, and in many cases have surpassed in size some of the traditional land-grant or land-grant and state institutions. My other alma mater, Arizona State, was a small normal school, and it is now a regional urban institution with lots of part-time students. And it is much larger than the land-grant in that state, Arizona, but Arizona is the statewide institution serving a variety of communities. One of the unique things about land grants is that they got their start in terms of funding by the federal government giving them land and using that land to be sold to finance this education. So in many ways they also have different kind of financial structure than you would find, say, in other institutions which have not been part of that financial arrangement.
And this is a pretty broad question I'm about to pose, especially as a follow-up, but if Tony will let me, I'll do it. Change seems to be everywhere these days. We can all pretty well accept that, but is the mission of the land-grant institution changing more or less than that of other institutions, or are they all struggling to keep up with change?
I think they're all struggling to change. And in our case, we're trying to define what we want to do in this incredible change demographically in America, a much more diverse America, a new information technology revolution in which we find ourselves, a science revolution in which science is changing as we look at it almost as fast as we can think about it. Funding difficulties, where we were once high on the priority of most states. Given all of the things that states deal with today, we're no longer in that favored position that we once were, and therefore we're struggling to keep up with the demand. The change in terms of research funding, universities were a key part, particularly research universities, were a key part of the Cold War phenomena here, and that we were developing new knowledge to be utilized by the Defense Department and other departments in the Cold War with the Soviets. There is no Cold War, so there is no urgency about spending money on that again. So funding has dwindled significantly from what it once was. And the expense of education is much more than when I went to school on a $17 scholarship and books for another $34, so I had a $51 scholarship, which I thought was extraordinary, but it certainly doesn't match what we're doing today. In that context, we have three goals that we're looking at. The first one is we want to significantly enhance our undergraduate mission. And the first dimension of that is we want to be a land-grant, we want to be a residence campus of choice. Residence campuses are really going to be competitive over the next couple of years, looking for those students who have either the grades to get scholarships or the money to go off to live in a residence experience. And I think there's a very special thing that comes from residence experiences. And so we're going to try to enhance ourselves to make sure our value is such that people will be willing to pay that kind of money to come, or certainly choose us because of their scholarship opportunities. Secondly, we want to enhance, we want to create the dimension of the centers we have around the state, such as the one here in Coeur d'Alene and elsewhere, and make sure that those have better, more effective delivery of education in our land-grant areas, such as ag, such as natural resources, those areas where we have unique responsibilities within the state. And thirdly, we want to explore the internet and how it will fit in what we do. Second goal is research. We're a research university, as according to the Carnegie definition of those institutions. There are about 125 of us in this country. And there are going to be fewer of them because of the lack of research dollars. We want to aggressively maintain ourselves in that position, because if we don't, the state of Idaho will be without one. And we think that would be a tragedy in terms of economic development, because research universities are a very key factor of that. And thirdly, we want to develop new knowledge and get it off the campus in the hands of the consumer out there, particularly industry, so that we can assist economic development. So if you take those three goals, then we're going to be really working on how to make our campus even more effective as a place of learning, how to bring the faculty and graduate students together to provide that research base, particularly with industry. And thirdly, to be involved in projects around the state, which will deliver our educational programs to the people of the state, as well as our educational activities.
Thank you.
Dr. Hoover, it's fascinating talking to you because your knowledge is so extensive on this subject. Certainly when you were addressing Steve's last question about the student that's in residence at the campus and so forth, you have also mentioned that there's tremendous change going on in the delivery system of communications. That is correct. One of the things that we're hearing a lot about is the Western Governors University. And would you share with us your thoughts about, and I know that in the future there'll be some kind of partnership between those students who come to campus and those that are off at great distance. How do you, from a visionary viewpoint, how do you see that being compatible in the future?
Well, the key to all this is technology, and that is, given the kind of scarce resource environment in which we find ourselves, we need to be more productive. And I think one of the things that will allow us to do that in the years ahead will be the use of technology both on campus and off campus. On campus, I think there are a variety of skill areas that we can utilize technology, in which we can utilize technology to actually increase the learning that would take place. I must emphasize, though, that it's not cheap. I mean, I think everybody looks at technology as something you buy once and you don't buy it again. In the computer revolution, you buy it again and again and again and again, because the revolution is so extraordinary in terms of what computing is all about today. And I think you will see that we'll also use the same thing off campus in delivering those things. But the really revolutionary part of all of this is what the internet is going to do, and how it might or might not lend itself to academic curriculum, particularly per credit curriculum, and how it might lend itself to, say, continuing education, where you could deliver off-the-shelf continuing education through an internet specially designed for a particular clientele on demand. And I think that kind of technology is going to allow an explosion in another area of education, and that is continuing education for professional groups. And I think it will do the same thing, obviously, for community college in terms of workforce training in ways we haven't thought about in the past.
In doing that, however, is it not correct that although there'll be some real imagined things take place there, but there's certain training that has to be on site? I'm thinking particularly in the sciences where there needs to be the lab and the experimentation under the guidance of the professors.
I think the beauty of what a residence campus obviously offers is that interaction between students themselves and the faculty member. But this technology also gives the faculty member, I think, more power to do things in many ways that we haven't been able to in the past. Let me give you an example. I think in terms of simulations and virtual reality technology, we'll be very close to being able to do simulations of chemistry experiments and biology experiments in ways we never thought of. And there's some advantages in that it'll be cheaper. It'll deal with the problem of waste remediation, which is a big problem for chemistry labs and for biology labs. So there are some advantages that we'll even build into this in terms of simulations and virtual reality simulations, which will be on the horizon. Some schools have already moved to this, and I think in many ways they moved too quickly. But there certainly is the potential here, I think, and we will be looking at that, how that emerges, very, very closely. We're hiring, for example, we've redefined a position on campus which was open, and we're in the last stages of hiring a executive director for information resources and technology on the campus. And that person's responsibility is going to be help us move through this as an institution, to give us the help to plan for where we'd like to go with this technology and using it both on campus as well as extending our education off campus.
I have one final question before we go back to the panel. It's more localized, but it certainly impacts this whole area. And for our viewers in other states and Canada that are not aware of the development, there are plans in place to bring a research center to our county at Post Falls at what we call Riverbend. And I understand it's both research and application through work and industry. Would you share with us your thoughts and what the future holds for that project?
It's the kind of project, if we'd been talking 15 years ago, we'd be chatting about how we went to the legislature and asked for X numbers of dollars to buy the land, build the building, and put the programs there. We knew there wasn't much of an opportunity to do that given the changing times. And so we looked at a different way. And that way was to build a partnership which would allow us to do the same thing without bringing to the table a lot of state dollars to do this. And there were several key partners. Clearly, North Idaho College is one of the key partners in this because of its workforce training activities and its vocational educational programs. Moreover, North Idaho College has a facility right adjacent to the area that we're talking about. Secondly, there was the existence of a private partner looking to bring advantage to their land as well as thinking about how to provide educational opportunities for this area. And they provided, the Jacklin Seed Company, Jacklin Land Company to be precise, provided a gift of land to our foundation, University of Idaho Foundation. The University of Idaho Foundation will collateralize that gift and use it as the basis, the note on that as the basis to build the first building. As we've gotten into this, we're looking at bringing research and educational activities associated with several areas. One would be engineering and manufacturing technology. The second one would be water research, particularly remediation of wastes in water. Thirdly would be engineering management degree of interest to many people in this area. Fourth would be some of the biotechnology, the things that we're now looking at, which we think would have a significant interest in terms of companies in this particular area. The hope here is to use our resources to bring value to that area, which will attract important companies to this region. And that would assist the economic development of the region, which we think is what Kootenai County is about at this particular point in time. And that would make us an important partner in this. And we would be looking for other partners, both public and private. And clearly Post Falls as a community, in terms of its government, has been very supportive of how this has evolved.
Thank you, Janelle Berg. Oh, sorry.
One other thing, Tony, and there was also somebody else who was very important to this, and this obviously is Judy Meyer. And the leadership of this community, which was very supportive in thinking about how to do this, something we'd never done before, and thinking about how to support us in doing that.
She's a very visionary person, and
Yes.
for our viewers in other states, she's the new chair of the State Board of Education in Idaho. Janelle Berg.
I know that you are going to be the leader of the University of Idaho as we progress into the 21st century, and many of our viewers, I'm sure, would want to know what kinds of things you see as coming in higher education, the future. What does it hold? As a former Dean of Women at Idaho State University, and also as a parent, I have a lot of interest in the residential and how students are going to live and work in higher education. What's going to help them through those formative years? And I'm sure there are many parents out there who maybe within the next 5 years will have students who are going to universities. What kinds of things should we be looking for and preparing our young people for?
I think there's several kinds of things. I think you want to prepare your student for an experience in a discipline or an interdisciplinary program, which will obviously provide them with a potential for lifelong learning. Whether that be in a science or in engineering, not just a narrow program in which you pick up discipline skills, that is, you learn how to design and build a building, but one in which you pick up skills from that discipline which will open up a potential to keep learning about this particular process over a lifetime. I think secondly are the higher order skills that are associated with higher education and the preparation for those in high school. And what I'm talking about is critical thinking, and that is the ability to think in a sense a little bit outside the box and to solve problems by using historical methods, science methods, engineering methods. The ability to use mathematics to solve problems, which I think is one of the weakest dimensions of Americans' educational skills today, or achievements today. In addition, a visual literacy and an information literacy, and that is a knowledge of how to use this new information technology to find data. But it's not enough to find it. You have to have the critical thinking skills to be able to use that data in an effective way. Visual literacy in terms of being able to imagine spatial things and the kind of visual images that we have around us, which are so powerful today. These are some of the things, and there are obviously many more. I'm biased about having a good historical context to deal with this as well. But these kinds of higher order thinking skills, I think, have to be developed obviously early on and through the school system. And so emphasizing those kinds of things, I think, gives the student the best opportunity to be successful in college. When you're looking at a college, I think you want to look at several things. You want to look, if you're place-bound, obviously, in a college it's going to be able to meet your needs in that area. But if you have a chance to go to residential experience, then I think you want to look again at several dimensions. In either case, you're looking for value. How much value is the institution going to provide you in these 3 to 4 years that you're going to be there, in some cases 5 or 6? And secondly, what's the cost of what you're going to encounter? And thirdly, what kind of a social environment are you going to have there? Because that's going to affect both the value and the cost that you're going to experience there. And I guess the thing that surprises me somewhat is I've gotten to know the University of Idaho. I thought I had a pretty good understanding of the value and the cost, and I think I was surprised to find out it was much better than I even anticipated. And that's very rewarding.
Steve Sheen.
Dr. Hoover, you've talked about some of the the opportunities that the university is exploring. The Riverbend Center, the potential of using the internet more completely. Do you see any threats out there? And the obvious one, of course, is money. So I'm not even really referring to that. But are there other threats to the quality of education at the University of Idaho that concern you, or even in a larger sense to higher education in general?
Well, I think cost is a problem, and scarce resources, I think, are a significant problem. The state, I believe, like many states, has developed such an immense agenda because of the offloading of responsibilities from the federal government to the state government, that this has brought a number of new players to the game. In the last 10 years, corrections in our state has grown by 324%. The state budget has grown by 120%, and higher education has grown by 77%. And what you value shows up as to where you spend your money. And I don't think you can blame anybody in the state, certainly not the legislature or the governor, for this. But what we need to do, I think, is to have a discussion in the future about where higher education does fit into this, and what we want higher education opportunities to provide. Because in our country, there's an extraordinary connection between learning and earning. The more learning you have in a formal sense in this country, the greater opportunity for a lifetime of earning. And so I think it's very important for us to look at how that's going to unfold. The second problem, to a great extent, is the belief that technology is going to answer all of our concerns about learning today. Technology, again, is just one tool that allows us to do this. And as I've said before, I think it has a powerful potential to increase our productivity. But I still believe the essence of education is the relationship between that creative and imaginative professor and that student. There's something magical when you get a number of these students and a good professor together. That can be enhanced by all of these other things, but the magic is still there.
I have to interrupt. I really am sorry to do so on behalf of our panel and
We're
staff.
finished, aren't
We are finished, Dr. Hoover, but the good news is that for our viewers, I'm sure you'll consent to come back at some future time. And it's been very informative. And we just got started, and we'll continue later.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Dr. Robert Hoover, who is the president of the University of Idaho, talking about higher education. He will return at some future date. I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, when we shall discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.